You know how every brand does a collab now? That's because of this guy, Hiroshi Fujiwara. You might not know his name, but if you've ever lined up for sneakers or cared a little bit too much about the perfect hoodie, you've felt his influence. He's the godfather of streetwear, not because he wanted to be, he just had good taste, and he shared it. From London punk to New York hip-hop to Tokyo street style, he connected it all before the internet could. And when people ask why he does it, he just says because he wants to wear it. That's the whole philosophy. Quiet, curious, and cool as hell. Let's start with how a bored kid accidentally rewired global fashion. Hiroshi Fujiwara grew up in Ise, a small, quiet town built around one of Japan's most sacred shrines, Ise Jingu. It's the kind of place where everything feels very ancient and beautiful and calm, which for a restless teenager means nothing ever happens. So Hiroshi left. At 18, he moved to Tokyo and immediately started looking for something bigger. He saved up, went to London, and walked straight into the middle of the punk movement. It's the early 80s. Vivienne Westwood's shop is still open, the Clash are on the radio, and fashion looks like chaos in motion. Hiroshi is there, he's taking notes. Then he goes to New York, where he finds something completely new. Hip-hop. Block parties, turntables, graffiti, this whole new world built on rhythm and rebellion. He buys records, he studies the DJs, and he realizes that this is the next wave. So when he goes back to Japan, he brings that energy with him. He starts DJing around Tokyo, mixing punk attitude with hip-hop sound. And eventually he forms Tiny Punks, one of Japan's first ever hip-hop groups. They even opened for the Beastie Boys when they played in Japan. So before Japan had received Western street culture, Hiroshi was already living it. No internet, no algorithm, just a kid chasing good music, and accidentally ending up as a bridge between worlds. So while he's DJing and bringing hip-hop to Tokyo, Hiroshi starts writing. He has this column called Last Orgy in a pop culture magazine called Takarajima, and it's basically just him talking about what he sees overseas. The music, the fashion, and the little details that no one in Japan would have exposure to. It's not necessarily academic or serious, it's more just like, hey, here's what's happening in London right now. Here's what kids in New York are wearing. And for Japan in the 80s, that was freaking huge. There was obviously no social media, no YouTube. If you wanted to know what was cool, you had to read Last Orgy. And this column ended up inspiring a whole generation of Japanese kids. One of those kids was named Tomoaki Nagao, who you probably know as Nigo, and he was obsessed. He recorded every episode of Last Orgy 2, which is the TV show that came later. He was like a super fan, archiving everything. And that is how Hiroshi went from being a DJ to being a legend. Basically, if Tokyo had a culture plug before Wi-Fi, it was Hiroshi Fujiwara. By the late 80s, Hiroshi's name was very much around Tokyo's creative scene. He was that guy who always had the new records, the new shoes, so when he met Stüssy, founder of Stüssy, it just clicked. Sean saw what Hiroshi was doing in Japan and basically said, "You're one of us." He sent him boxes of Stüssy gear, made him part of the international Stüssy tribe, which was like a loose network of DJs and skaters and artists who kind of got the vision. So anyway, moving on. Picture this. We're in early Harajuku. There's a small group of kids wearing Stüssy before anyone even knows what that is. That was Hiroshi and his circle. They weren't chasing trends, they were creating them just by wearing what they liked. And that moment, this kind of exchange between California surf culture and Tokyo street style, was a pivotal moment in what we now call streetwear. So after the Stüssy era, Hiroshi decided to make something of his own. In 1990, he launched a brand called Goodenough, and the name kind of says it all. It wasn't about perfection or luxury, it was about attitude. He took everything that he'd learned, punk's rebellion, hip-hop's swagger, Tokyo's precision, and put it all into clothes. Simple graphics, clean shapes, and drops that sold out instantly. He didn't even put his name on it. No big marketing push, just small batches that disappeared as fast as they arrived. And if that sounds familiar, that's because everyone does that now. Goodenough basically invented the idea of limited drops. But back then, it wasn't about hype. It was about how Hiroshi worked. Make something cool, make just a few of them, move on. He wasn't trying to build an empire, but he was inadvertently building a culture. And that culture became the foundation for modern streetwear. Goodenough walked so Supreme could wait in line. Anyway, by the early 90s, Hiroshi had already done music, writing, and fashion, but his biggest impact would come from what he shared. In 1993, he helped two young designers, Nigo and Jun Takahashi, to open their own store. It was a tiny store in Ura-Harajuku called Nowhere, and it sold clothes from both of their brand new brands, A Bathing Ape and Undercover. It wasn't fancy, it was just a tiny room that was packed with ideas. But it became the spot, a hub for Tokyo's underground. Skaters, creators, musicians, designers, everybody passed through. What they were building wasn't just retail, it was a community. Nowhere became the starting point of the Ura-Harajuku movement, the birthplace of modern Japanese streetwear. And the wild part is, Hiroshi Fujiwara barely put his name on it. He was just happy to stay in the background, connecting people, giving advice, and just watching it all grow. So when people call him the godfather of streetwear, it's not because he built like the biggest brand, it's because he helped everybody else to build theirs. Around this same time, Hiroshi teamed up again with Jun Takahashi, but this time not as like mentor and student, this time it was as equals. They started a small project called AFFA, Anarchy Forever, Forever Anarchy. Sounds very dramatic, but really it was just their way of paying tribute to the punk roots that got them started. You know, they were inspired by Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McLaren, and they tried to capture that in their own way. The clothes were really rough and handmade and intentionally imperfect, but still sharp and still very thought through. You could tell it came from people who really loved the culture, not just the look. They made tiny runs, sold out fast, and then moved on. It wasn't meant to be a huge brand, more like a creative project between two friends. Anyway, moving on again. By the early 2000s, Hiroshi had really done it all. DJ, writer, designer, mentor. So instead of starting another brand, he created something looser. In 2003, he launched Fragment Design. Now, Fragment wasn't a traditional label. It was more like a creative studio or a platform for collaborations. Hiroshi described it as a way to work on anything that interested him without being tied down. One month it might be sneakers, and the next it's furniture or guitars or even a mahjong table. And this is where this kind of modern collab culture really begins. He worked with Nike on the HTM line, that's Hiroshi Fujiwara, Tinker Hatfield, and Mark Parker, the trio that basically turned sneakers into collectibles. He also teamed up with Levi's, with Converse, with Louis Vuitton, Moncler, even Pokemon. Everything that Fragment touched looked clean, minimal, and premium. He'd take something very familiar like an Air Jordan and just strip it back to its purest form. And when someone once asked him why he does all these collaborations, he said, "Because I want to wear it." Checks out, that's the whole point. No hype, no overthinking, just curiosity, taste, and a good eye. Multiplied across basically every brand on earth. And after decades of shaping culture, Hiroshi is still not chasing credit. He's not loud, he's not trying to go viral, he just keeps making things. You know, it seems like when people call him the godfather of streetwear, he kind of shrugs it off. It seems like he never meant to start anything, he just followed what felt good. He doesn't run big companies or post motivational quotes. He prefers staying small, moving fast, and keeping things interesting. One month he's designing sneakers, the next he's doing a pop-up in a swimming pool or a car park or something. For him, it's never about hype, it's about curiosity. So I really think that thing of collaborating just because you want to wear that product yourself, that's really the entire secret. Do it because you love it, keep it small, and make it good. These days, Hiroshi is still everywhere, but quietly. You know, Fragment drops something new basically every month. Sneakers, cups, furniture, even a Tamagotchi. He's still that same curious kid, just with a much longer contacts list. You can see his fingerprints on a lot of stuff, from the way brands do limited drops to the way every creative now wants to be part of a collab. Hiroshi had a big hand in the creation of that culture. That's what makes him different. He's not the loudest voice in the room, but he's the one that everyone is quietly copying. You know, streetwear might change names or die or get reborn every few years, but as long as Hiroshi Fujiwara is around, to me, it's still cool. Thanks for watching. Thank you. Like and subscribe.